Chernobyl disaster was one of the craziest things to have happened in human history. But things that were discovered after it was crazier. From messed up forests to mutilated animals, there is so much that will leave you flabbergasted. Let's get started. Number 1. Red Forest. The Red Forest, also known as the Rusty Forest or Rudy Lis in Ukrainian, is a 10 square kilometer area surrounding the Chernobyl nuclear power plant within the exclusion zone in Polisia, Ukraine. This forest is one of the most contaminated areas in the world, having received the highest doses of radiation from the 1986 Chernobyl disaster. The forest got its name from the ginger-brown color of the pine trees that died due to high levels of ionizing radiation. The intense radiation caused the trees to die almost instantly, giving the area a distinct and dangerous appearance. The radiation altered the trees, turning them a rusty red color, which led to the name Red Forest. After the disaster, the pine trees were bulldozed and buried in trenches, which were then covered with sand and planted with new pine saplings. However, the forest has become a unique habitat for flora and fauna, including some endangered species. Background radiation in the immediate area ranges from 10 to 40 mSvh. In 2019, scans of the area revealed hotspots of ambient radiation, 20.5 mSvh. The International Atomic Energy Agency reported that radiation levels inside the trenches dug by Russian forces in 2022 was 6.5 mSvh, which could cause radiation sickness with prolonged exposure. The decay rate of plant matter in the Red Forest is significantly slower than in other forests due to inhibited microbial activity. Microorganisms that normally decompose forest litter do not function as efficiently in the contaminated zone. This is why the forest accumulates a larger amount of detritus, which increases the risk of wildfires. Number 2. Babushkas of Chernobyl. The Babushkas of Chernobyl is a group of elderly women who, despite the catastrophic nuclear disaster in 1986, chose to return to their homes within the heavily contaminated Chernobyl exclusion zone. These women, also known as babushkas, show resilience and determination. When the Chernobyl disaster happened on April 26, 1986, due to a failed safety test, it released massive amounts of radioactive material into the environment. The Ukrainian government responded by evacuating about 116,000 people and establishing a 1,000 square mile exclusion zone around the plant. However, about 1,200 people, mostly elderly women, decided to stay behind or return to their ancestral homes. They've become known as the self-settlers. Living in a radiation-laden zone, these women have adapted impressively. They grow their own food using traditional methods and have honed instincts for navigating their hazardous environment, knowing where it's safer to roam and what activities to avoid to minimize radiation exposure. Despite the evident health risks, including a rise in thyroid cancers and other radiation-related illnesses, these babushkas show attachment to their land. Number 3. Altered genetics in dogs. The dogs living in and around the Chernobyl exclusion zone have developed some unique genetic traits, likely due to a mix of radiation exposure, isolation, and inbreeding. These dogs are quite different from other dog populations, and scientists are curious about what caused these changes. Researchers have discovered significant genomic variations among the dogs in different parts of the Chernobyl exclusion zone. This suggests that while the dogs live close to one another, they do move around and breed freely between sites. Interestingly, dogs near the nuclear plant and in Chernobyl city are genetically distinct from those in less contaminated areas like Slavutich. The exact reasons for these genetic differences aren't entirely clear. It could be due to radiation-induced mutations, the survival of dogs with certain genetic features, or just inbreeding over the past 37 years since the disaster. Many of these dogs seem to be related to German shepherds, indicating they might be descended from pets left behind during the evacuation. This unique genetic diversity makes these dogs ideal for studying the long-term genetic health effects of living in a highly radioactive environment. Number 4. Deformed animals. Following the Chernobyl Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986, many farm animals were born with deformities, likely because of radiation-induced DNA damage. In the years right after the accident, cows and sheep that had been moved away from the contaminated areas became noticeably sick along with their babies. Studies on sheep showed that even when they were exposed to low levels of radioactive iodine, their growth and development could be slowed down. Their ability to have babies could be reduced, and their babies might not be as healthy. When the radiation levels were higher, pregnant ewes often couldn't give birth to healthy babies at all. Scientists haven't gathered a lot of data on exactly how the radiation affected animals at a DNA level. However, they've noticed more genetic damage in other species like fruit flies, mice, and a type of weed called thale cress. There were specific examples of deformities and birth defects in farm animals after the Chernobyl disaster. For instance, burros had shorter lifespans, and cattle developed squamous cell carcinoma around their eyes, on the skin, above their sacral region, and on their withers. Cattle also got cataracts, and chickens had early heart problems like myocardial atrophy and fibrosis of the pericardial sac. Dogs and pigs experienced issues like skin atrophy, liver problems, kidney fibrosis, and neuropathy, as you can see on the screen right now. Number 5. Massive sarcophagus. The massive sarcophagus, also known as the shelter object, was originally built to contain the radioactive materials released from the damaged reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in 1986. It was put up to limit the spread of radioactive contamination and shield workers from dangerous radiation levels. But the original sarcophagus was just a temporary solution and had its problems. It often leaked and corroded, which wasn't good for the long haul. This structure was not lightweight either. It was made of steel and concrete, covering the damaged reactor. Despite its sturdy appearance, it had issues like over 1,000 square meters of openings in the roof from mismatched joints, letting water in and causing corrosion. So they came up with a better plan, the new safe confinement. This steel arch is a beast, measuring 162 meters in length and 108 meters in height, weighing even more than the Eiffel Tower. Rolled into place in November 2016, it's built to last and keep any potential radiation leaks contained for the next 100 years. The construction of this new confinement was a big deal in the cleanup and containment efforts post-Chernobyl. Its main job is to prevent more radioactive leaks and keep the environment and people safe, and it's got all the right tools to take down the original sarcophagus and remove radioactive materials from the site, making it even safer. Number 6. Gas masks in school. Middle school number 3 in Pripyat, near the indoor swimming pool on Sportivnaya Street, is famous for a sight that you can't shake off. Hundreds of child-sized gas masks scattered across its floors. These masks are from the Cold War era, meant to protect students from nuclear, biological, and chemical threats. During the Cold War, the fear of nuclear war was always present, and part of preparing for such a threat involved keeping gas masks in schools. Initially, these masks were stored in the school's basement. Over time, some masks were moved upstairs, possibly by photographers or tourists, to create a more striking scene. Walking through the abandoned school and seeing these small gas masks is both scary and moving. They show us how people prepared for a nuclear disaster that ironically did happen nearby, not because of war, but due to an accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Number 7. Blackbird. The Blackbird of Chernobyl is a story that people tell about something strange, seen before the big accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in 1986. Workers said they saw a huge black creature that looked like a person but had big wings and red eyes. They thought seeing it meant something bad was going to happen. Some of the workers who saw the Blackbird had scary dreams and got weird phone calls afterward. Some people think this story is like another one from the 1960s about a creature called the Mothman in West Virginia. People thought both creatures were warning about bad things that were going to happen, but not everyone believes this story. The first time anyone talked about the Blackbird was in 2005, almost 20 years after the Chernobyl accident. And there's less proof that anyone looked into these sightings back then. Some experts think maybe people just saw a regular bird with red marks around its eyes and made up the story from there. Number 8. Radiation-eating black fungi. The radiation-eating black fungi, also known as radiotrophic fungi, are crazy examples of how nature can adapt and survive in harsh conditions. These fungi, discovered in the 1990s inside the Chernobyl reactor and its contaminated surroundings, have a crazy ability. They can turn gamma radiation into chemical energy. Similar to how plants use sunlight for photosynthesis, researchers led by Ekaterina Dadachova and Arturo Casadevall at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine found that the key to their survival is melanin, the same pigment that colors our skin. Melanin helps the fungi deal with and utilize high-energy radiation by changing its electrochemical properties, making it better at transferring electrons. This is especially helpful in places like the Chernobyl reactor, where nutrients are scarce. Certain fungal species like Cladosporium, Sphaerospermum, Cryptococcus neoformans, and Wangiella dermatitidis grow faster and accumulate more biomass under high radiation. This opens up possibilities for using these fungi for radiation protection or even generating energy. Their usefulness isn't limited to Earth either. In 2016, SpaceX and NASA sent melanized fungi to space to test if they could shield against cosmic radiation. Early studies suggest they might reduce radiation levels by about 2%, which could be crucial for protecting astronauts on long space missions. Research is ongoing to explore how these fungi could be used to safeguard astronauts and manage radiation on Earth better. It's a crazy concept, isn't it? The idea that something as harmful as radiation could be turned into a useful energy source by these fungi offers exciting possibilities for future technologies, both in space exploration and right here on our planet. Number 9. Stalkers of Chernobyl. The term stalkers refer to individuals who visit the Chernobyl exclusion zone. These adventurers are attracted by the opportunity to explore a place dramatically transformed by the 1986 nuclear disaster and now reclaimed by nature. They seek adventure and a sense of transgression, often documenting their experiences with photos and videos shared within a close-knit community. This community connects through online forums and social media, exchanging tips, planning expeditions, and sharing stories of their explorations. Stalkers use detailed maps, historical information, and Geiger counters to avoid the most radioactive areas and minimize exposure. But let's be real, it's not a walk in the park. Radiation levels can vary sharply, posing serious health threats, and entering the zone without official permission is illegal, which can result in fines and imprisonment. The activities of these stalkers have been chronicled in various forms of media. For instance, Darman Richter's book, Chernobyl, A Stalker's Guide, offers an in-depth look at their experiences, showing the beauty of the zone through rich photography. Number 10. Color-changing frogs. In the Chernobyl exclusion zone, there's this thing happening with eastern tree frogs. They've gone from their usual bright green color to this almost black hue, and researchers think it's all because of the 1986 nuclear disaster. Back in 2016, scientists came across these frogs chilling near the damaged reactor, sporting this dark, melanin-packed skin that was totally different from their usual green getup. This change didn't happen overnight, though. Frogs with more melanin were better equipped to deal with the radiation, so they were more likely to stick around and pass on their genes. Over time, this trait became super common in the frog population, leading to most of them rocking that dark skin. What's really cool is that this color switch isn't just about the current radiation levels in the zone. It's actually tied to the historical levels from back when the disaster went down. Now, scientists want to know exactly how these critters evolved to handle all that radiation and what it could mean for other species facing similar challenges. Number 11. Atomic vodka. Scientists from the University of Portsmouth in Ukraine have created a vodka called Atomic using grains and water sourced from the Chernobyl exclusion zone. This innovative project was designed to prove that the distillation process can effectively remove radioactive contaminants from these ingredients, ensuring the vodka is safe to consume. The vodka's ingredients include rye grain grown within the exclusion zone and water drawn from an aquifer in the town of Chernobyl, located 10 kilometers south of the damaged reactor. Despite the grain showing levels of radioactivity slightly above the Ukrainian limit for safe consumption, the distillation process successfully eliminated these impurities. The final product contained only trace amounts of naturally occurring carbon-14, making it entirely safe to drink. The scientists tested atomic vodka to ensure it posed no health risks, and their findings confirmed that the finished product had no detectable radioactivity. Number 12. First responders. The firefighters who first responded to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster faced extreme danger, suffering severe radiation poisoning and, in many cases, acute radiation syndrome. Their experiences show the grave human cost of the catastrophe. When the accident occurred on April 26, 1986, the initial explosion and subsequent fires exposed the first responders to incredibly high levels of radiation, with some areas around the reactor reaching up to 10,000 rads. These levels were far beyond what is considered safe, and the consequences were immediate and devastating. The first responders, including firefighters and plant workers, were unaware of the full extent of the radiation hazard. As they bravely battled the fires and tried to contain the situation, many were exposed to intense radiation doses. This led to severe radiation poisoning, manifesting as acute radiation syndrome. The mortality rate among these first responders was tragically high. Within a few weeks of the disaster, it is estimated that around 28 individuals died due to ARS, including many firefighters who were at the front lines of the response effort. Survivors have experienced an increased risk of various cancers, including thyroid cancer and leukemia, as well as other radiation-related health issues. Number 13. Toxic elephant's foot. The elephant's foot is a highly radioactive mass of corium that formed beneath reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. This mass is infamous for its extreme radioactivity and the severe health risks it poses to anyone exposed to it. The elephant's foot was created during the catastrophic meltdown of the Chernobyl reactor in 1986. As the reactor's core melted, a molten mixture of nuclear fuel, concrete, and other materials flowed into the basement of the reactor building. This lava-like mixture eventually solidified into a dense black mass known as corium, forming what is now called the elephant's foot due to its appearance. The composition of the elephant's foot is complex. It is primarily made up of silicon dioxide, but it also contains various other oxides including uranium, calcium, iron, zirconium, aluminum, magnesium, and potassium. One of its key components is uranium dioxide, a highly radioactive material that emits alpha radiation. When it was first discovered, the elephant's foot emitted 8,000 to 10,000 Roentgen per hour, translating to 80 to 100 grays per hour. This level of radiation is lethal, capable of causing severe radiation poisoning and death within minutes of exposure. Despite the passage of time, the elephant's foot remains in the basement of reactor number 4 and continues to emit dangerous levels of radiation. It is still one of the most hazardous objects in the world, which can pose great risks to anyone who enters the area. Number 14. Abandoned vehicles. In the rush to evacuate the Chernobyl exclusion zone, many vehicles were left behind, including buses, cars, trucks, and even emergency vehicles. These abandoned vehicles now sit in what's often referred to as a vehicle graveyard, slowly decaying over time. Number 15. Documents about the Chernobyl. The Wilson Center's History and Public Policy program published these documents, which were originally from the archives of the Ukrainian Security Service, or the Ukrainian KGB. These documents give us a closer look at what happened before, during, and after the Chernobyl disaster. They cover everything from technical memos about the construction of the Chernobyl plant to reports on how society reacted to the accident. It's crazy to see these records now available in English translation, especially since they were declassified and shared on the Ukrainian Center for Research on the Liberation Movement's website back in 2016 for the 30th anniversary of the Chernobyl nuclear accident. It's like getting a new perspective on a historical event that's shaped so much of our understanding of nuclear safety. These translations complement another batch of records that were shared earlier in 2019. It's all part of an effort to piece together the full story of what happened at Chernobyl and its aftermath. Number 16. To Sweden. It's crazy how far-reaching the effects of the Chernobyl disaster were. I mean, did you know that the radioactive cloud it spewed out reached all the way to Sweden? This image is from June 1986 of a Swedish farmer wearing anti-atomic gear while shifting fodder that got contaminated by the radioactive cloud from Chernobyl. Imagine being that farmer, just going about your daily routine, and suddenly having to deal with the aftermath of a nuclear disaster. Number 17. Dolls of Chernobyl. In Chernobyl, dolls are placed around the area as a tribute to those affected by the nuclear disaster. These dolls, however, have led to many debates about whether they genuinely represent the site's history or if they alter the authenticity of what happened. Some people view these dolls as meaningful memorials, while others think they may distort the real story of Chernobyl by adding elements that weren't originally there. Number 18. Abandoned amusement park. In Pripyat, there's an amusement park that was set to open just days after the Chernobyl disaster struck. It never saw visitors because the area was evacuated due to the nuclear accident. Today, the rusting Ferris wheel and unused bumper cars stand there as reminders of the lives and community abruptly interrupted by the disaster. Number 19. Silhouettes of missing people. Throughout Pripyat, there are art installations featuring black silhouettes that represent the residents who had to leave their homes suddenly. These silhouettes are painted on the walls of buildings, creating a haunting and evocative reminder of the people who once lived there but had to flee because of the nuclear disaster. These artworks make the absence of the residents feel more real and tangible, adding a layer of emotion to the abandoned spaces. Number 20. Genetic deformities in humans. Research indicates that children born to parents exposed to radiation during the Chernobyl disaster are more likely to have congenital malformations. And it doesn't stop there. The aftermath of Chernobyl has been associated with various genetic effects, such as mutations and abnormalities in chromosomes. This kind of damage can have long-lasting effects, potentially causing a range of birth defects and genetic disorders in future generations. And yes, still people are born with genetic deformities there. And with that, we are done for today. Don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with your friends. And if you want to stay up to date with more stories like this, be sure to subscribe to our channel.